The blood-stained telegram trembled in Zara Goldsmith's hands as she stood outside the Western Union office in San Bernardino, California, in the sweltering summer of 1875. Her father was dead, murdered by the notorious Blackwell gang, and her family's ranch seized by men with guns and false papers. With nowhere to turn and bounty hunters on her trail for a crime she didn't commit, Zara had just one desperate chance at survival: find the legendary lawman they called the Ghost before her pursuers found her. The main street of San Bernardino buzzed with the usual afternoon activities: merchants hawking their wares, cowboys fresh off the trail spending their pay, and the occasional well-dressed businessman hurrying to his next appointment. At 22, Zara had never felt more alone, more exposed. Her cotton dress was dusty from the long journey, and her dark blonde hair was tucked messily beneath a worn bonnet, offering little protection from curious eyes. She kept her head down, clutching the small satchel that contained all her remaining possessions. The telegram, now folded and hidden in her pocket, had cost her last coins. 3 weeks ago, she'd been the educated daughter of a successful rancher. Now she was a fugitive with a $500 bounty on her head. "Watch where you're going, miss." A portly man in a business suit barked as she accidentally bumped into him. "My apologies," Zara murmured, stepping quickly into a narrow alley between the general store and the saloon. She needed to find a way to reach the sheriff's office without being spotted by anyone who might recognize her from the wanted posters that had begun appearing throughout San Bernardino County. From the alley, she could see the jailhouse across the street. Just as she was about to step out, the doors of the saloon burst open and 3 men emerged. Their gun belts and hardened expressions marked them as the bounty hunters who had been asking about her at the stagecoach office earlier that day. "She's got to be in town somewhere," one of them said, scanning the street. "That reward money's gonna buy me a fine piece of land up north." Zara pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding. These weren't ordinary bounty hunters, they were Blackwell's men, the same gang that had murdered her father and framed her for the killing of a ranch hand. They wanted her silenced permanently. "You there!" In the alley, the shout froze her blood. Without thinking, Zara turned and ran deeper into the narrow passage, emerging behind the buildings. She sprinted toward the livery stable, hearing heavy footfalls behind her. A shot rang out, splintering wood near her head. Zara ducked instinctively but kept running. The livery stable offered little safety, but she had nowhere else to go. She burst through the back door, startling a tall man brushing down a magnificent black stallion. "Please," she gasped. "They're going to kill me." The man's eyes narrowed beneath the brim of his hat. He moved with surprising speed, pulling her behind a stall door just as her pursuers entered the stable. "You see a woman come through here, blonde, mid-20s?" one of them demanded. The stranger stepped forward, blocking their view of Zara. "Nobody's come through 'cept me and the horses." His voice was deep calm, with a quiet authority that made even the bounty hunters hesitate. "You sure about that? There's $500 for anyone who helps us find her." "I don't much care for your money." The stranger's hand rested casually near his holster. "I suggest you look elsewhere." Something in his tone made the men reconsider their approach. They backed away slowly, promising to return. When they were gone, the man turned to Zara. "You're in a heap of trouble, I reckon." For the first time, she got a good look at her rescuer. He was perhaps 30, with sun-weathered skin and serious gray eyes that seemed to see right through her. His clothing was trail-worn but clean dark trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a brown leather vest. Unlike many men in town, he wore only one gun, a Colt revolver in a well-used holster. "Thank you," Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't do what they say I did. Most folks running from the law say the same. He studied her face for a long moment, but not all of them have eyes that speak the truth like yours do. I need to find someone, she said urgently. A lawman they call the ghost. My father said if I ever found myself in trouble, I should seek him out. A flicker of something recognition perhaps crossed the man's face. Your father being Edward Goldsmith. He owned the Crescent Moon Ranch north of here until 3 weeks ago when he was murdered. The stranger's expression hardened. I heard about that. Word is his daughter killed a ranch hand and ran with the money. That's a lie, Zara said fiercely. The Blackwell gang killed them both and framed me. They wanted our land because there's a silver vein running through the northern pasture. My father discovered it just before he died. The man was silent for a long moment. You got a name, Zara. Zara Goldsmith, he nodded slowly. Garrett. Garrett Griffin. Most folks just call me Griffin. Mr. Griffin, I don't mean to involve you in my troubles, but those men will be back. I need to find the sheriff. Sheriff won't help you, Griffin said bluntly. He's in Blackwell's pocket, has been for years. Zara's hope dimmed. Then I truly am lost. Griffin sighed, removing his hat to run a hand through his dark hair. Not necessarily. I might know something about this ghost you're looking for. Hope flickered in her chest. You do, maybe. He glanced toward the stable entrance. But we can't talk here. Those men will be back, and they won't be alone. He reached for the saddle nearby and began preparing his stallion. Can you ride? Since before I could walk. Griffin nodded approvingly. Good, we'll leave after dark. There's a small room above the stable where the stable boy sleeps, but he's gone to visit his mother in Los Angeles. You can rest there until nightfall. Why would you help me? You don't know me. Griffin paused in his work. I knew your father, not well, but enough to know he was an honest man. That's rare enough in these parts. He returned to cinching the saddle. Besides, any enemy of the Blackwell gang is a friend of mine. Zara followed Griffin up a narrow staircase to a small, sparse room with a cot, a washstand, and little else. Rest, he instructed. I'll bring some food later and keep watch. If anyone comes looking, stay quiet. Thank you, she said, suddenly overwhelmed by the kindness of this stranger when everyone else seemed determined to see her dead or captured. Griffin paused at the door. Don't thank me yet. We've got a long, dangerous ride ahead of us tonight. Left alone, Zara sank onto the cot, finally allowing the exhaustion of the past weeks to wash over her. She had been running for so long, barely sleeping, constantly looking over her shoulder. Now, for the first time since her father's murder, she felt a flicker of hope. She pulled the telegram from her pocket, reading it again. Come to San Bernardino. Stop, seek the ghost, stop. He will help you stop, trust no one else. Stop. The message had been waiting for her at the Western Union office in Santa Fe, sent by her father days before his death, as if he had sensed the danger approaching. Who was this ghost her father had trusted so completely? And why did Griffin's reaction to the name seem so personal? As promised, Griffin returned after dark with bread, cheese, and dried beef wrapped in a cloth. Eat quickly, he said. We need to leave soon. One of Blackwell's men was asking about you in the saloon, described you perfect. Zara ate hurriedly. Where are we going? North, into the mountains. I have a cabin there. It's remote. No one will find us while we figure out what to do next. You still haven't told me how you know about the ghost. Griffin's expression remained unreadable. Some things are better discussed away from town. Finish eating. We leave in 10 minutes. True to his word, Griffin had her mounted on a sturdy bay mare within minutes. They slipped out the back of the livery stable and kept to the shadows until they reached the edge of town. Only when San Bernardino was well behind them did Griffin urge their horses into a gallop. They rode hard for several hours, following game trails and dry creek beds instead of established roads. The mountains loomed ahead, dark against the star-filled sky. Zara's body ached from the pace and the tension, but she didn't complain. Every mile between her and San Bernardino meant greater safety. Near dawn, they reached a small valley nestled between two ridges. A cabin stood in a clearing, partially hidden by pine trees. It was solidly built, with a stone chimney and a small corral for horses. "It's not much," Griffin said as he helped her dismount, "but it's safe. No one knows about this place except me." Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable, one main room with a fireplace, table, chairs, and a bed in the corner, separated by a rough curtain for privacy. Griffin quickly built a fire while Zara stood awkwardly, unsure of her place in this man's home. "Take the bed," he said, seeming to sense her discomfort. "I'll sleep by the fire. You must be exhausted." "Thank you." Zara hesitated. "Mr. Griffin, I don't know how to repay your kindness." "No need for repayment, and it's just Griffin." He stoked the fire. "Get some sleep. We'll talk in the morning." Zara wanted to press him about the ghost, but weariness overtook her. She barely remembered removing her boots before collapsing onto the bed, surrendering to the first deep sleep she'd had in weeks. She woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Griffin moving quietly around the cabin. Sunlight streamed through the small window, suggesting it was well past dawn. "You slept through yesterday and all night," Griffin said, noticing her confusion. "Don't worry, we're safe here." Zara sat up, embarrassed at having slept so long. "I'm sorry, no need. Your body needed it." He handed her a cup of coffee. "There's a creek about 50 yards east if you want to wash up. I'll have breakfast ready when you return." The cold creek water was revitalizing, washing away days of dust and fear. When Zara returned to the cabin, Griffin had prepared a simple but hearty breakfast of bacon, beans, and biscuits. As they ate, Zara studied her mysterious benefactor. In the daylight, she could see the fine lines around his eyes and the silver threading through the dark hair at his temples. His hands were calloused, but his movements were precise, almost elegant, not what she expected from a frontier horseman. "You said you knew my father," she began cautiously. Griffin nodded. "We crossed paths a few times over the years. He was helping move cattle up from Mexico when I first met him. Always struck me as a good man." "He was," Zara said softly. "He built our ranch from nothing after my mother died. Taught me everything, riding, shooting, even how to run the business." She set down her cup. "Now it's all gone. Stolen by Blackwell's men with forged papers claiming my father sold the land before his death." Griffin's expression darkened. "Blackwell's been taking over half the county. Anyone who stands in his way ends up dead or ruined." "Is that why he's after you too?" Griffin looked up sharply. "What makes you think he's after me? This cabin, the way you live, you're hiding from something or someone." Zara held his gaze. "And you know who the ghost is?" "I saw it in your face when I mentioned the name." For a long moment, Griffin was silent, weighing his words carefully. Finally, he sighed. "The ghost is what they called me when I wore a badge. U.S. Marshal for the Arizona Territory. Had a knack for tracking men others couldn't find." His voice grew distant. "Some of Blackwell's men were part of a gang I was hunting 3 years ago. I caught up with them near Tucson. Things went bad, very bad." "What happened?" "They'd taken a family hostage. I got the family out, but—" His hand unconsciously moved to his side, where Zara noticed a slight stiffness in his movement. "I took 3 bullets. Should have died. When I recovered, the Marshal Service wanted me behind a desk. I turned in my badge instead." "So you're the ghost," Zara said softly. "The man my father trusted." Griffin nodded. "Your father helped me when I was hunting that gang, gave me information, shelter I owed him." His eyes met hers. "And now I owe you the same." "You've already done more than enough." "No," Griffin interrupted firmly. "Blackwell's men killed your father and stole your land. They're the same men who killed that family in Arizona. They need to answer for their crimes." "But how? You said yourself the sheriff is in Blackwell's pocket. They've framed me for murder. Who would believe us?" Griffin's expression hardened with determination. "I still have friends in the Marshal Service. If we can gather enough evidence of Blackwell's crimes, they'll act. But first, we need to clear your name. The ranch hand they claim I killed, his name was Tommy Davis. He was like family to us. He was shot in the back while trying to defend my father." Zara's voice broke. "I found them both. I was about to go for help when Blackwell's men arrived. They saw me and started shooting. I ran." "Smart move," Griffin said. "If you'd stayed, you'd be dead too." "But everyone believes I killed Tommy for the money and ran." "Not everyone." Griffin rose from the table. "I believe you, and I think I know how to prove your innocence." Over the next few days, Griffin revealed his plan. They would gather evidence against Blackwell and his gang while simultaneously clearing Zara's name. It was dangerous, requiring them to return to San Bernardino and potentially face the men hunting them. During this time, Zara came to know the complex man behind the legend of the ghost. Griffin was methodical, disciplined, and fiercely principled. He taught her how to move silently through the forest, how to read tracks, and how to shoot with deadly accuracy. "You've got a natural eye," he commented one afternoon as she hit 3 targets in succession with his Winchester rifle. "Your father taught you well. He wanted me to be able to defend myself and the ranch." Zara lowered the rifle. "Fat lot of good it did him in the end." Griffin stepped closer, his hand briefly touching her shoulder. "Don't think like that. Your father was up against professional killers. The fact that you escaped shows he taught you exactly what you needed to know." These small moments of connection between them grew more frequent as the days passed. Sometimes it was just a look or a brushing of hands as they prepared meals together. Other times, it was in their conversations by the fire at night, when Griffin would share stories of his time as a marshal, and Zara would tell him about her dreams for the ranch. One evening, as a summer storm raged outside the cabin, Griffin revealed more of his past. "I was married once," he said quietly, staring into the flames. "Her name was Hannah. We had a little place outside Tucson." Zara waited, sensing there was more to the story. "She died of fever while I was away chasing outlaws. By the time I got the message and returned home, she was already buried." His voice was hollow with old grief. "After that, the badge seemed less important, but I kept wearing it because it was all I had left." "I'm sorry," Zara said softly, reaching across to touch his hand. Griffin looked down at their hands, then slowly turned his palm upward to hold hers. "It was a long time ago, but it's why I understand loss." Their eyes met across the firelight, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared pain and, perhaps, a tentative hope for something more. The moment was broken by a sound outside, a branch snapping under weight. Griffin was on his feet instantly, gun drawn. "Stay here," he whispered. Moving silently to the window through the rain-streaked glass, they could see a figure approaching the cabin, a solitary rider, hunched against the storm. "Could be a traveler seeking shelter," Zara suggested. Griffin shook his head. "No one finds this place by accident." He positioned himself beside the door, gesturing for Zara to move behind the table for cover. "Get ready." A knock came at the door, 3 sharp raps followed by 2 slower ones. Griffin's posture relaxed slightly. "It's all right," he said, holstering his weapon. "That's a friend." He opened the door to reveal a rain-soaked man in his 40s with the weathered look of someone who spent his life outdoors. "Charlie," Griffin greeted him, Wasn't expecting you. Wouldn't have come if it wasn't important." Charlie stepped inside, nodding respectfully to Zara. "Madam, this is Charlie Winslow," Griffin explained. "Former deputy marshal and one of the few men I trust completely." Charlie removed his dripping hat. "Wish I was bringing better news. Blackwell's offering $1,000 for the woman now dead or alive, and he's added $500 for anyone helping her." He gave Griffin a pointed look. "Meaning you." Griffin's face remained impassive. "What else?" "They found a witness, a ranch hand who claims he saw Miss Goldsmith shoot Tommy Davis in the back. Says she was stealing money from the safe when Tommy caught her." "That's a lie," Zara exclaimed. "There was no other ranch hand there that day except Tommy." "I believe you, miss," Charlie said. "But the witness is convincing. A fellow named Jake Mercer." Zara's face paled. "Jake Mercer? He was fired 2 months ago for stealing cattle. My father caught him red-handed." Griffin and Charlie exchanged significant looks. "That's our break," Griffin said. "If Mercer was fired, there would be records. Maybe witnesses who knew about the cattle theft." Charlie nodded. "I can look into it, but there's more. Blackwell's planning something big. He's bringing in men from as far as Texas and Colorado, something about a major silver strike." "The vein on my father's land," Zara said quietly. "That's what he was after all along." Griffin paced the small cabin. "Charlie, I need you to get a message to Marshal Sullivan in Tucson. Tell him what we suspect about Blackwell. Meanwhile, we need to find proof that Mercer is lying and evidence of Blackwell's involvement in the murders." "That means going back to San Bernardino," Zara realized. "Not you," Griffin said firmly. "It's too dangerous. It's my father's murder we're trying to solve." "My name we're trying to clear," Zara argued. "Besides, you'll need someone who knows the ranch, who can identify where records might be kept." Griffin looked like he wanted to argue, but Charlie interrupted. "She's right, Griffin. You'll need her knowledge." After Charlie left, promising to contact Marshal Sullivan, Griffin and Zara spent hours refining their plan. They would travel separately to San Bernardino, Zara disguised as a young widow seeking work, Griffin as a drifter looking for employment with the Blackwell operation. "It's risky," Griffin admitted, "if they recognize either of us." "They won't," Zara said with more confidence than she felt, "and it's our only chance." That night, as they prepared for sleep, the tension between them shifted. Their impending separation and the dangers ahead made their unspoken feelings more urgent, more real. "Zara." Griffin said her name softly as she was about to retreat behind the curtain to her bed. "If anything happens to me, don't," she interrupted, turning to face him. "Nothing will happen to you, or to me. We will succeed." He stepped closer, his gray eyes intense in the firelight. "Nevertheless, if we get separated, there's a box under the floorboard beneath the bed. Inside is money and papers enough to get you to San Francisco and start a new life." "I don't want a new life," Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want justice, and I want—" She didn't finish the sentence, but her meaning hung in the air between them. Griffin's hand rose to touch her cheek, calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "When this is over," he promised, "we'll talk about what comes next." For a heartbeat, it seemed he might kiss her, but instead he stepped back, respecting the boundaries between them. "Get some rest. We leave before dawn." The journey back to San Bernardino was fraught with tension. They traveled separately as planned, Zara with her hair dyed dark and wearing mourning clothes, Griffin having grown a beard and adopted the rough manner of a drifter. They agreed to meet only if absolutely necessary, at a predetermined location outside town. Zara found work as a cook's assistant at the San Bernardino Hotel, which gave her access to conversations among the town's elite, including members of the Blackwell operation who frequented the hotel's restaurant. Griffin, meanwhile, hired on as a stable hand at the livery, positioning himself to overhear the comings and goings of Blackwell's men. For 2 weeks, they gathered information separately. Zara learned that Blackwell was planning a large celebration at the hotel, something about a new business venture that promised to make San Bernardino the silver capital of California. Griffin discovered that shipments of mining equipment were arriving daily, destined for the Crescent Moon Ranch. Their first meeting came on a Sunday afternoon in a small grove of trees by the creek outside town. Zara arrived first, heart pounding with anxiety. When Griffin appeared, the relief she felt was overwhelming. "Are you all right?" he asked immediately, scanning her for any sign of injury or distress. "Fine. So far. Blackwell's men are careless with their talk around the stables. They think I'm simple because I don't say much." He sat beside her on a fallen log. "What have you learned?" They exchanged information rapidly, constructing a clearer picture of Blackwell's operation. The man had systematically taken over businesses and properties throughout the county, using a combination of intimidation, forgery, and murder. The Crescent Moon Ranch was his crowning acquisition, a property with a silver vein potentially worth millions. "We need to get onto the ranch," Zara said. "My father kept records in a hidden compartment in his desk. If we can find evidence of the real ownership, plus his correspondence about the threats from Blackwell." Griffin nodded. "I'll find a way. Blackwell's planning a big gathering at the hotel on Saturday, something about investors from San Francisco. Most of his men will be in town." "I know about it. I'm supposed to help serve the dinner." Zara hesitated. "Griffin, I overheard something else. Jake Mercer, the man who claimed to witness me killing Tommy, he's getting nervous. One of the maids said she heard him arguing with Blackwell's foreman, saying he didn't sign up for murder." Griffin's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Sounds like Mercer's conscience is troubling him. Maybe he'd be willing to tell the truth if approached the right way." "Or if he feared for his life," Zara suggested. The ghost had quite a reputation for finding men who didn't want to be found. A slow smile spread across Griffin's face. "Are you suggesting I resurrect the ghost to put the fear of God into Jake Mercer?" "I might be," Zara said, returning his smile, "if Mercer confessed the truth about what really happened that day." "It would be a start," Griffin agreed, "but we'd still need proof of Blackwell's involvement in your father's murder and the land theft." "One step at a time," Zara said, rising from the log. "We should get back before we're missed." Griffin caught her hand as she turned to leave. "Zara, be careful if they discover who you are." The concern in his eyes warmed her heart even as it reminded her of the danger they faced. "I will." "You too." He held her hand a moment longer, then released it reluctantly. "Same time next Sunday. I'll be here." That night, as Zara lay in her small room above the hotel kitchen, she found herself thinking of Griffin not as the legendary lawman or her protector, but as the man whose rare smiles made her heart race, whose steady presence gave her strength. It was dangerous to feel this way during such a perilous time, yet she couldn't deny the truth of her emotions. She was falling in love with Garrett Griffin. The next few days passed in a blur of work and clandestine observation. Zara noticed increased activity around town, important-looking men arriving on the stage, meetings in the hotel's private dining room, Blackwell himself strutting about like a peacock showing off his feathers. On Wednesday evening, as she was carrying linens to the laundry behind the hotel, Zara overheard two of Blackwell's men talking in the shadows. "Mercer's getting cold feet," one said. "Boss says we need to make sure he stays reliable until after the investors sign the papers." "And then?" the second man asked. "Then he has an unfortunate accident. Same with the girl if we find her." Zara froze, barely daring to breathe. What about the ghost? Word is he's helping her. If he exists, we'll deal with him too. Boss says after Saturday, we'll have so much money and power that no one will dare challenge us. Zara slipped away silently, her mind racing. They needed to warn Griffin that Mercer was in danger. If Blackwell silenced him, they'd lose their best chance at a witness. Unable to wait until Sunday, Zara risked sending a note to the livery, hidden in a basket of muffins ostensibly for the stable boy. The message was simple. M in danger. Must act quickly. Meeting place tonight. Griffin was waiting when she arrived at the Grove after dark. What happened? He asked without preamble. Zara quickly related the conversation she'd overheard. Griffin's expression grew increasingly grim. They're planning to kill Mercer once they have the investors' money, he concluded. We need to get to him first. Where would we find him? He's staying at the bunkhouse on the Crescent Moon. I heard one of Blackwell's men mention it yesterday. Griffin thought for a moment. This changes our timeline. We need to move now tonight while Blackwell's distracted with his investors. What do you need me to do? Come with me to the ranch. You know the layout where your father kept his records. While I deal with Mercer, you can search for the documents we need. The plan was risky, but they had no choice. Using horses Griffin had prepared for such an emergency. They rode the familiar trail to the Crescent Moon Ranch under cover of darkness. Zara's heart ached as the silhouette of her family home came into view. Even in the moonlight, she could see changes, new outbuildings, the beginnings of what looked like mining structures in the north pasture. They've wasted no time, she whispered bitterly. Griffin squeezed her shoulder gently. We'll make it right. They approached cautiously, leaving the horses hidden in a stand of trees. Most of the ranch was dark, with only a few lamps burning in the bunkhouse and one in the main house. I'll go to the bunkhouse for Mercer, Griffin said. You head for your father's office. Be careful, there may be guards inside the house. Zara nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by memories of the last time she'd been here, finding her father and Tommy dead, fleeing for her life as bullets tore through the air around her. Griffin seemed to sense her distress. Zara, he said softly, turning her to face him. You can do this. You're stronger than you know. Before she could respond, he leaned forward and kissed her, a brief, tender gesture that conveyed everything they hadn't said to each other. When he pulled back, his eyes held a promise. We'll finish this conversation later, he said. I'm counting on it, she replied, newfound determination flowing through her. They separated, each moving toward their target. Zara circled the house, avoiding the pools of moonlight. She knew every inch of this place, which floorboards creaked, which window latches were loose. She found a side window that opened to her touch and slipped inside, into the familiar darkness of her childhood home. The interior had been changed, new furniture, unfamiliar paintings on the walls. But the basic layout remained, and she navigated silently to her father's office at the rear of the house. The office door was unlocked. Inside, she found the room transformed into a makeshift headquarters for the mining operation. Maps covered the walls, showing the silver vein and planned excavation sites. Her father's desk remained, however, and she moved toward it with purpose. The hidden compartment was accessed by pressing a specific sequence of decorative carvings on the desk's side panel. Zara held her breath as she did so, praying that Blackwell hadn't discovered the secret. To her relief, a small drawer slid open silently. Inside were exactly what she'd hoped to find: her father's journal documenting Blackwell's threats, copies of the real property deeds, and correspondence with the land office confirming his ownership. There was also a letter addressed to her, which she tucked away for later reading. She was gathering the documents when she heard a commotion from the direction of the bunkhouse, shouts, and the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. Griffin. Zara's heart lurched. She quickly secured the documents inside her shirt and was turning to leave when the office door opened. A man stood in the doorway, a lamp held high. "Well, well," said Blackwell himself, his round face twisted in a cruel smile. "If it isn't the murdering Goldsmith girl, I've been looking for you." Behind him stood two armed men, their guns already drawn. Zara's hand moved toward her hidden derringer, but Blackwell shook his head. "I wouldn't," he warned. "Even if you managed to shoot me, my men would cut you down before I hit the floor." He stepped into the room, studying her face. "I must say the dark hair is a nice touch. Had me fooled for a while." "You murdered my father," Zara said, her voice steady despite her fear. "You stole our land." Blackwell chuckled. "Business, my dear, just business. Your father was sitting on a fortune and didn't even know how to properly exploit it." He gestured around the room. "I, on the other hand, have investors ready to make this the most productive silver mine in California. You won't get away with this." "I already have." He nodded to his men. "Take her to the barn. Keep her quiet until after the investors' meeting on Saturday. Then we'll arrange a suitable accident. Perhaps the murderous Goldsmith girl returned to the scene of her crime and was killed resisting arrest." As the men moved toward her, a commotion erupted in the hallway, the sounds of a struggle, a body hitting the floor, and then Griffin appeared in the doorway, his gun trained on Blackwell. "I'd reconsider that plan," he said coldly. One of Blackwell's men turned to fire, but Griffin was faster. The shot dropped the man where he stood. The second guard froze, uncertain. "Drop it," Griffin ordered. The man complied, his weapon clattering to the floor. Blackwell's face had drained of color. "Griffin, the ghost, you're supposed to be dead. Sorry to disappoint." Griffin moved into the room, keeping his gun steady on Blackwell. "Zara, are you all right?" "I found the documents," she said. "Everything we need to prove what he did." Blackwell's eyes darted between them, calculating. "Now let's be reasonable. There's enough silver in this land to make us all rich. Why fight over it when we could be partners?" "Partners?" Zara stepped toward him, rage boiling inside her. "You killed my father." "That was an unfortunate necessity. Business can be messy sometimes." Blackwell's eyes narrowed. "But what's done is done. The question is what happens now." "What happens now," Griffin said, "is you face justice for murder, fraud, and about a dozen other crimes." Blackwell laughed, a hollow sound. "Justice in this county. I own the sheriff, the judge, half the businesses in San Bernardino." "Who exactly will be delivering this justice?" "I will," came a new voice from the hallway. A tall man in a U.S. Marshal's uniform stepped into the room, followed by Charlie Winslow and another deputy. Behind them, looking terrified but resolute, was Jake Mercer. "Marshal Sullivan," Griffin acknowledged with a nod. "Right on time." "Heard you could use some federal assistance," Sullivan said, his eyes cold as they settled on Blackwell. "Mr. Blackwell, you're under arrest for the murders of Edward Goldsmith and Thomas Davis, as well as conspiracy, land fraud, and interfering with federal mining claims." "This is absurd," Blackwell sputtered. "You have no jurisdiction here." "Actually, I do. The moment you filed fraudulent mining claims on federal land, you made this my business." Sullivan nodded toward Mercer. "Plus, we have a witness ready to testify about how you ordered the killings and framed Miss Goldsmith." Mercer stepped forward nervously. "It's true. I was supposed to say I saw her kill Tommy, but I wasn't even there that day. Blackwell paid me to lie." Zara felt a wave of relief wash over her. With Mercer's testimony and her father's documents, Blackwell's crimes would finally be exposed. Sullivan and his deputies took Blackwell and his remaining man into custody. As they led them away, Sullivan turned to Griffin. "Good work, Ghost. The Marshal Service has missed your talents." Griffin shook his head. I'm retired, remember? Sullivan smiled knowingly. If you say so. He tipped his hat to Zara. Madam, I believe this property legally belongs to you. We'll make sure the records are corrected. When they were alone, Griffin holstered his weapon and closed the distance between them. Are you hurt? No, Zara said. But what about you? I heard gunfire from the bunkhouse. Mercer was more cooperative than expected. The shot was just to convince Blackwell's guard to step aside. Griffin's eyes softened as he studied her face. It's over, Zara. You're safe now. Your name is cleared. The full impact of those words hit her suddenly. After weeks of running, hiding, and fighting, justice had finally prevailed. Her father's killers would face punishment. Her home was hers again. And yet, as she looked around the changed office, Zara realized that home meant something different now. The Crescent Moon Ranch held too many painful memories. What will you do now? Griffin asked, as if reading her thoughts. I don't know, she admitted. Rebuild, perhaps, or sell and start fresh somewhere else. She looked up at him. What about you? Will you go back to your cabin in the mountains? Griffin reached out slowly, taking her hand in his. That depends. On what? On whether I'm going there alone. His gray eyes held her steadily. These past weeks working with you, getting to know you, they've changed me, Zara. You've reminded me what it means to fight for something that matters, to care about someone again. Zara's heart pounded as she stepped closer to him. I'm not sure I'm worth all the trouble you've gone through for me. I'm not worth saving, she whispered, the words catching in her throat. The cowboy said, You're worth everything to me, with such conviction that Zara felt tears spring to her eyes. Everything, he repeated softly. This time when they kissed, there was no urgency, no danger lurking around the corner, just the sweet promise of a future together. Griffin's arms encircled her, strong and protective, and Zara felt herself melting into his embrace, knowing she had found not just justice, but love. 3 months later, the Crescent Moon Ranch was transformed. With Griffin's help, Zara had rebuilt the operation, focusing on cattle rather than the silver mine. The mining rights had been properly filed with the federal government, with profits going to a trust established to benefit the community of San Bernardino, supporting schools, a proper hospital, and other public needs. Blackwell and his associates faced trial in federal court, their crimes too numerous and well documented to escape justice. Jake Mercer, having testified against his former employer, worked to make amends by helping rebuild the ranch he had once betrayed. On a crisp autumn evening, Griffin found Zara sitting on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson. He sat beside her, taking her hand, automatically, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. Marshal Sullivan sent word, he said. The jury convicted Blackwell on all counts. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. Zara nodded, a sense of closure washing over her. Good. Though no punishment can bring back my father or Tommy. No, Griffin agreed, but they'd be proud of what you've accomplished here. She smiled, leaning against his shoulder. What we've accomplished. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Griffin kissed the top of her head. You're stronger than you know, Zara Goldsmith. You would have found a way. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. I've been thinking, Griffin said finally. This place is getting too big for just the two of us to manage. Are you suggesting we hire more hands? Zara asked. Because Charlie mentioned his nephew is looking for work. And actually, Griffin interrupted, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I was thinking we might need to consider making this arrangement more permanent. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small ring, a simple gold band with a single diamond that caught the last light of day. I'm not one for fancy speeches, he said, his voice husky with emotion. "But I love you, Zara. These past months have been the happiest of my life. I want to build something lasting with you, whether it's here on the crescent moon or somewhere else entirely." Tears of joy spilled down Zara's cheeks as she looked from the ring to the face of the man she loved. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to all of it, the ranch, a future, a life together." As Griffin slid the ring onto her finger, Zara marveled at how far they had come from a desperate fugitive and a retired lawman to partners in every sense of the word. "You know," she said as he pulled her close, "when my father told me to find the ghost if I was ever in trouble, I think he knew exactly what he was doing." Griffin chuckled. "Edward Goldsmith was a wise man." "And a good judge of character," Zara added, leaning up to kiss her future husband as the stars continued to emerge above the ranch they would build together. Their wedding, held the following spring, was a community celebration that brought together people from throughout San Bernardino County. Charlie Winslow served as best man, while the daughter of the local doctor stood as Zara's maid of honor. Marshal Sullivan made the journey from Tucson, bringing news that Griffin's old badge was still waiting for him if he ever wanted to return to service. "I appreciate the offer," Griffin told him, his arm around his new bride, "but I've found a different kind of purpose now." As years passed, the legend of the ghost faded into frontier history, replaced by the reality of Garrett and Zara Griffin, respected ranchers and pillars of the San Bernardino community. They built a larger home on the Crescent Moon land, raised 2 children, a son named Edward after Zara's father and a daughter named Hannah after Griffin's first wife, and established one of the most successful cattle operations in Southern California. The silver mine operated under federal supervision, providing jobs and prosperity for the region without the corruption and violence that had marked Blackwell's brief tenure. Zara established a school on the property for ranch children and those from neighboring farms, fulfilling a dream her father had once shared with her. And on quiet evenings, long after the children were grown with families of their own, Garrett and Zara would still sit together on the porch swing, watching the sunset and remembering how their story began with a desperate whisper and a promise that changed both their lives forever. "I'm not worth saving," she had whispered on that fateful night, and the cowboy had replied with all the certainty in his heart, "You're worth everything to me." It was a promise he kept every day for the rest of their lives.